great story of the miraculous draft of fishes in Luke's gospel is both a literary and spiritual masterpiece. It's like the Road to Emmaus story that way, where you can read really the whole of the spiritual life off of that great narrative. You know how Jesus simply gets into Simon's boat without asking permission, without any kind of preparation. He just gets into his boat. And compare that now to someone just getting into your car today. Someone that you barely know just gets into your car and then begins to give orders. Well, you'd be a little put off. Especially now you're a Galilean fisherman. Your boat is your life. It's your livelihood. Well, into this boat gets Jesus, tells Simon to go out, from the shore a little bit so he can preach. And then he says, go out into the depths. Well, see, it's a very important spiritual symbolism going on there. Is Jesus getting into the boat is what I would call the invasion of grace. That grace breaks into our lives. Without our asking permission, without our expectation, it breaks in. Now, what follows is the key question of your life. Namely, how and whether you cooperate with it. There's all kinds of questions that we face about our finances, about our families, about our careers, and they're all important, but they're nothing compared to that question. When grace breaks in, what do? Do I say yes to it, cooperate with it? Do I reject it? I've often quoted Flannery O'Connor saying that her stories are all about the offer of grace, usually refused. There's the central tragedy of life as she saw it. Okay, so here Jesus gets in the boat, and Simon's tremendous virtue is that he cooperates. Lord, we've been at it all night, we've caught nothing, but if you say so, I will go out into the depths. Again, it's very powerful. Simon, on his own terms, following his own wisdom and intuition, has caught nothing. So it goes with us in the spiritual order. As long as we're following our designs, our worldly plans, and so on, we're not going to catch much life. That's what the fish symbolize here. But Jesus says, now go out into the depths. Mind you, when grace comes into your life, it means things will get deeper. You're going to move from the shallows into the depths. Will it be more dangerous? Yes. Will it be more exciting? Yes. But not in the worldly way. Not like worldly danger, worldly excitement. That's nothing. Compared to spiritual depth, spiritual danger, spiritual excitement, that's what Jesus offers. As he goes out into the depths, that means you're cooperating ever more fully with the divine life. What are you going to find? You're going to find life so abundant that it overwhelms you. That's now Peter trying to take in the fish and the nets are tearing. Here's an experienced fisherman, knows all about nets and about fishing, but he's overwhelmed by what he's found. And then a beautiful detail, the other fishermen come, the other boats come to help him. So it goes in the spiritual life. When you follow Christ, you go into the depths, the life will start coming in such a way that other people are drawn into the process. That's always the case in the lives of the saints. Okay, so there's a beautiful metaphor of what happens when we cooperate with grace. The Latin there is duc in altum, go out into the depths. That's what happens. Well, just last week, I had the great privilege of staying for a few days with Archbishop Peter Sarton, who's the Archbishop of Seattle. I was there for some seminary business and also to give a talk on the new evangelization. But it was a great privilege to spend a couple of days at his home. And the very first night I was there, he took me to his office. And there were extensive bookshelves in his office. And we're both bibliophiles. We both love religion, theology, philosophy. So there we stood, commenting on various books and what we've read and what we should read, etc. Well, I noticed on his bookshelf a whole series of books about Pier Giorgio Frassati. Now, I knew a little bit about Frassati, that he had been beatified by John Paul II in 1990, had seen some photos of him, knew a little bit about his life. But I said to the Archbishop, I don't know much about Frassati. Well, it turns out that Archbishop Sarton is a great expert on Frassati. And with great enthusiasm, he began to show me these books and the photographs and some of the pictures, and he outlined the life of Frassati and so on. So with that, I went back to my room, and I opened the door of the closet to hang up my suit jacket. And looking right at me from the floor of the closet was this very large and beautiful painting of Frassati. And it was based on the photo you often see of him, and he's standing on a mountainside. He was a mountaineer. He has a pipe coming out of his mouth, and there he is in the full bloom of youth and athleticism. So I thought, okay, Lord, I wonder if you're trying to tell me something that I should pay more attention to Frassati. So I took the picture out, and there was a peg or nail up on the wall of the room, and I put it up there. So when I prayed that night, the next morning, I was looking at Frassati. Well, the next day, the Archbishop gave me a bunch of these books and encouraged me to read them, and I did in the course of the next couple of days. And what's uncovered is a life that is, in one sense, very simple. From a worldly standpoint, it doesn't amount to much. There, he reminds me of a little flower, you know. But here's what's interesting about Frassati. He's born in 1901. He's the son of the editor of La Stampa, one of the biggest newspapers in Italy, who eventually became a senator and ambassador to Germany. So a very prominent figure in Italian society. Frassati's mother was a well-known painter. The father was more or less agnostic, had no religion, and his mother was, kind of vaguely or mildly Catholic, but neither one was strong religious at all. But strangely, this young man, their son, from a very early age, is enamored of the liturgy, and especially of the Eucharist and Eucharistic adoration. From the time he's a very young kid, he goes off for hours at a time to chapels and churches. His parents wonder where he is. As he gets older, they think he's out carousing. In fact, he's been in a chapel for an all-night adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. His parents were so alarmed, in fact, they contacted the priest he knew and said, what's happening with this kid? And the priest said, well, he's fine. Don't worry about him. He's adoring the Blessed Sacrament. The other thing that was real clear in Frassati's life was a deep devotion to and love of the poor and the indigent. He's from Torino, from Turin, and he's from this aristocratic background. You expect him just to be staying in, mansions and fine places. But he would spend the little money that he was given by his parents, he'd give it right away to the poor. And he gave his time away to them, spending long, long hours with the poor and the underprivileged. And in time, this very young man became known in Turin among the poor as a saint, as their great friend. He dies at 24, having contracted polio from the poor among whom he was working. And it was a type of polio that moved so quickly that in 5 days he was dead. And the amazing part of the story is when he died, his funeral was a giant event in Turin. Huge crowds came out. Now, not his parents' friends, not the leaders of Italian society, but rather the poor of Turin came out and carried his coffin and came in huge numbers. And they say his parents and family were flabbergasted. They had no idea he had this sort of hidden life. But the people knew his sanctity. Well, one of the photos in the books, and you see it a lot in the Frassati books, is he was a mountain climber. He was a serious mountaineer doing this real difficult kind of climbing with ropes and pickaxes and all that. Well, in this photo, he's clinging to the side of a cliff, and it's a steep, steep cliff like this. And he's looking up, and you can't see the top, and then below him, you can't see the bottom. He's in this very precarious position, climbing this cliff. And he had scribbled on the photo, his own hand, verso l'alto in Italian, which means to the heights. And of course, it's a literal commentary in one sense, but all those who knew Frassati knew that it had this spiritual overtone, that what he experienced was the invasion of grace. And what it led him to was l'alto, was to the heights. He didn't want a life of spiritual mediocrity. He didn't want mere worldly success. He wanted the heights of intimacy with Christ and service of his poor. It's a lovely coincidence that the Latin for go out into the depths that John Paul loved to cite from the Luke account, duc in altum, go out into the depths. So the same word, altum, becomes l'alto, the heights in Italian. And so it's the same idea, isn't it, that Frassati experienced the invasion of grace, and then this desire, this drive toward the depth, toward the heights. See, that's the thing for all of us. We shouldn't settle for spiritual mediocrity. We should go toward the heights.